The Specter of Communism in Hawaii, 1947 to 1953. Chapter 5, The Waiting. 8 months and 9 days passed between the December 1947 suspension of John and Eiko Rieneki as teachers in the public schools of Hawaii, and the beginning of their hearing in August 1948. Much of the delay was caused by legal procedures that are of no relevance to the substantive issues of the case, but the mood of the public during this waiting period is a matter of concern. The authors have already seen some of the ways in which the communist issue was projected into the labor and political arenas. Now, the focus returns to the Rieneki case, tracing the Rieneki's path as they prepared to face the judgment of the Territorial Commissioners of Public Instruction. There were some immediate manifestations of support for the Rienekis. Even before they were suspended, there was much speculation about the authorship of What Must We Do, the statement that Governor Steinbach had offered as the communist blueprint for Hawaii in his Armistice Day speech in 1947. An enterprising Honolulu Star Bulletin reporter, guessing or having been tipped off that John Rieneki was the author, interviewed Rieneki's principal on November 14, 1947. The interview was not quoted in the paper until the day after the Rienekis had been suspended. The principal of Farrington High School, Walton M. Gordon, said of John Rieneki that he was a very good teacher, one of the best we have at the senior level. There has never been any intimation whatever of Dr. Rieneki's flavoring his own teaching with whatever his political beliefs are. I think he reserves that entirely as an out-of-school activity. I believe the other teachers here would say the same thing. Immediate support came to the Rienekis from within the ranks of labor. On December 15, 1947, a meeting was held at Honolulu YMCA to discuss the Rieneki case. Marshall McEwen, the head of the CIO PAC, served as chairman. Harriet Bauslag spoke to the audience of about 200 about the civil rights aspects of the case. Most of those assembled were sympathetic to the Rienekis, but not all. Hal Lewis, better known in recent years as Aku, created a stir when he accused those assembled of merely throwing jeers at the Attorney General. Meyer Simmons, who was speaking at the time, brushed off Lewis' comments by charging that the radio personality had merely come to disrupt the meeting. With that, a lady jumped up and demanded to know where Lewis' civil rights were now. Marshall McEwen responded by giving Lewis the floor. Lewis used the floor to begin talking about the Ignacio Revolt and was declared out of order. One of the members of the audience asked all those who opposed communism to stand up. For what it was worth, about 15 of the 200 present rose. Footnote: Honolulu Advertiser, December 16, 1947, p. 1. Hal Lewis had worked for the ILWU when he first came to Hawaii and was employed by Robert McElrath on a daily pay basis. At the end of the sugar strike in 1946, Lewis told McElrath that big boys were interested in him and promised to remain loyal to the Union cause. However, after a couple of months, Lewis became an active spokesman for the Elks Club's Spearhead for Freedom, which frequently attacked the ILWU with its anti-communist stance. Footnote end. After an intermission, roughly 75 of those present remained to organize what came to be the Hawaii Civil Liberties Committee, HCLC. It was decided that the scope of the committee's activities would go beyond the Rieneki case, although that was the proximate issue for which the organization was being formed. HCLC supported the Rienekis throughout their ordeal, both financially and morally. It was to earn the reputation of a communist front organization in the eyes of many. Unexpected support came for the Rienekis from a group of clergymen on the island of Maui. A letter to the editor of the Maui newspaper indicated that the 10 undersigned ministers believed the Rienekis had been denied their civil rights. They made it clear that as ministers and citizens, we hold no brief for communism. If the Rienekis are members of the Communist Party as alleged, we feel they are misguided and are in serious error. But the present issue is not that of communism, as the governor insists. The present controversy involves the rights of citizens to believe what they see to be true, to act on those convictions within the law, and to associate with whomever they please. The letter went on to say that if the Rienekis had broken any law, as the original charges asserted, they should be given protections afforded by the judicial process. This letter was the product of a resolution proposed, though not prepared, in the closing minutes of a Maui ministerial meeting. The actual author was the Reverend Mainio Katagiri, who came under extreme pressure from local Kama'aina church supporters. In an interview with another of the signatories, the Reverend Abraham Akaka, Katagiri was told that it had taken a great deal of patience explaining to convince an aroused group of prominent citizens that the position taken by the ministers was an expression of our patriotism, rather than an attack upon American institutions. 4 days after the original letter, another appeared over the names of 5 of the original 10 Maui ministers. Neither Katagiri nor Akaka was among them. The five explained the way the actual letter had been authored, absolving themselves from any direct responsibility for the contents. They also protested the misuse of the letter in a Honolulu newspaper, where it appeared juxtaposed to an advertisement seeking financial support for the Reinekis. They concluded their letter with an oblique allusion to the fact that the references to the secret association statute had been dropped from the charges against the Reinekis. We feel that persons whose ideologies are in conflict with American principles should not be teaching in our public schools. Our sole concern in this case is one of civil rights. If these rights have been granted, and we are now informed that they have, then we have no further issue. In a final exchange with the editors of the Maui newspaper, who had been quite critical of the original letter written by Reverend Katagiri, the beleaguered minister asserted, "I still maintain that the way to fight the communists is to create here a land of freedom and the equal sharing of the earth's goods, and to bind its people by a common love for the rich blessings of liberty." The editors got the last word in the form of a question: Does Rev. Katagiri have any recommendations as to how the United States can fight an enemy within its own borders and thus protect the Bill of Rights and maintain the freedom which all Americans should love above life itself? Perhaps without realizing the two-edged profundity of the question posed to Reverend Katagiri, the editors rather petulantly announced that no more letters would be published on this controversy. The social disability of being associated with an accused communist became evident shortly after the Reinecki's suspension. Ray Jerome Baker, a lecturer, photographer, writer of frequent letters to Honolulu newspapers, and resident of Hawaii for 40 years, took John Reinecki to a meeting of his Lions Club as a guest. Shortly thereafter, Baker was dropped as a member of the club to which he had belonged for 10 years. A lawsuit was threatened, but it was a mark of the times that Baker felt obliged to declare to the press that "I am not now and never have been a member of the Communist Party." By the end of February 1948, the HCLC had raised $1,500 for the Reinekis and had collected 5,500 signatures on petitions asking for their reinstatement. The HCLC voted $500 for the support of a tour of the Outer Islands by John and Eiko Reinecki, and in March they were on their way. They faced generally friendly crowds, mostly union people, and got generally unfavorable editorial comment in the local papers. In Governor Steinbach's papers, there is a letter that demonstrates the many ways communism cut as an emotional issue in Hawaii. The letter was written by a teenage girl named Marion Lai. She met the Reinekis during their Outer Island tour and was drawn to the couple and obviously sympathetic about the plight in which the two teachers found themselves. Marion asked John and Eiko to sign her autograph book, and they did. Marion wrote that Eiko made the following inscription in her book: "All men may be cremated equal if we don't learn to live in peace. Let's do our bit for humanity wherever we are." John wrote, as Paul Robeson sings, "I've got to keep fightin' until I'm dyin', and so must we all, if we keep our heritage as Americans and continue to go forward." The more Marion thought about these statements, the more they seemed to her a badge of shame. She turned to Governor Steinbach to expiate her guilt. Her letter concluded, "I do not have anyone to confide in at home. First, because my father is a Union man and cherishes the Union as an ideal, while the snakes creep under the hollow trees. May you receive the greatest abundance of fortitude to combat this menace to Americanism, and may the Lord keep us both physically and mentally fit to combat communism without falling into it." Communism in the schools was a matter of concern to many. Even before the Reinecki case, the Advertiser was writing editorials on the subject that displayed alarm, if not historical accuracy. One such editorial read, "An island high school teacher's study of his pupils leads him to believe they are being made receptive to communism. This is being done by adroit propaganda that pictures Hawaii's industrial history as being akin to the feudalism of Tsarist Russia. It is decorated with a heroic picture of Russia's bravery in battle in World War II. Then the question is put, if communism hasn't given them something superior to inspire them, why then did the Russians fight? They failed under the Tsar in World War I. The teacher has made an intelligent and perceptive analysis of an effective method that is being applied diligently by communist propagandists here and throughout the United States. The answer, of course, is simply that it was not until after they had assassinated the Tsar that the Russians collapsed in World War I. Footnote, Honolulu Advertiser, August 11, 1946, page 32. The collapse of the Russian army was almost complete by the time of the Tsar's abdication in March 1917. The Kerensky government fell, in large part, due to its efforts to re-establish an Eastern Front in July 1917. Lenin's Order No. 1, immediately following the Bolshevik Revolution of October 1917, took Russia out of World War I permanently. Tsar Nicholas II was not assassinated until July 1918, and there is no evidence to support the assertion that he could have kept the Russian people fighting. Footnote end. How were schools supposed to handle the issue of communism? The matter had been widely discussed since the suspension of the Reineckies. On March 16, 1948, Superintendent of Public Instruction W. Harold Loper issued a circular introducing a special issue of School Life from February 1948. This issue was titled Zeal for American Democracy, and so was the circular. In the circular, Loper provided explicit guidelines for handling the communist issue in schools. The professional obligation of teachers to remain neutral on controversial issues and present impartial facts and arguments from both sides may result in uncertainty when it comes to communism. Communism is not just another political party, it's a dictatorship that demands unwavering loyalty and obedience, and it tolerates no disagreement, freedom of thought, or action, and crushes all opposition. A wise teacher, in discussing controversial issues, should not use their position or classroom to spread propaganda for either side. However, when it comes to communism, such academic impartiality is a sign of uncritical thinking, as there is no middle ground on this issue. In the final months before the Reinecki hearing, there was a flurry of activity involving the controversial Munt-Nixon bill. The bill was designed to protect the United States against un-American and subversive activities and required the registration of the Communist Party and its front organizations, as designated by the United States Attorney General. The bill also made it a crime to attempt to establish a totalitarian dictatorship under the control of a foreign power, and described the Communist Party in the United States as such. Walter Goodman, who worked on the House Committee on Un-American Activities, described the confusion over the possible consequences of the Munt-Nixon bill. This confusion was dramatized in a nationally broadcast debate between the leading contenders for the Republican presidential nomination, Governor Thomas E. Dewey of New York and Harold E. Stassen of Minnesota, as the bill was being argued over in the House. Both men appeared to favor the bill, but for different reasons. Stassen favored it because it would outlaw the Communist Party, while Dewey favored it because it would not. Footnote: Walter Goodman, The Committee, New York, Farrar, Straus and Giroux, 1968, p. 229. The Munt-Nixon bill passed the House in April 1948 by a vote of 319 to 58. The Senate held hearings, but the bill had little chance of passing due to opposition from the Truman administration and the late stage of the congressional session. In 1950, the Congress returned to the Munt-Nixon bill and produced Senator Pat McCarran's Internal Security Act, which incorporated the registration provisions of Munt-Nixon but avoided declaring the Communist Party illegal. According to Goodman, this provision was no longer necessary because the Smith Act, which stated that it was illegal to teach or advocate the overthrow of the American government by force or violence or to conspire with others to do so, had been invoked since 1948. If the courts chose to define membership in the Communist Party as participating in a conspiracy to overthrow the government, as was the case in the 1948-49 New York Smith Act trial of 11 Communist Party National Board members, then the provision in Munt-Nixon was unnecessary. Footnote end. In support of the Munt-Nixon bill, the women held a panel discussion at McKinley High School. The discussion was attended by 800 people and was addressed by Attorney Daniel G. Ridley, AFL leader Jonna Owens, and former Office of War Information and State Department official Norborne Smith. They discussed the different forms that anti-communism should take. However, one of the speakers, Ikiro Izuka, failed to show up. Footnote: the Women was established as a coalition of women's organizations to protest a threatened general strike of all public utilities workers in July 1, 1946. The coalition succeeded in preventing the strike from happening and turned its attention towards the threat of communism. A group of ILW-related women attempted to join the organization but faced resistance. A motion to include Aquan McElrath and Pauline Rosenthal on the executive committee was tabled, and the initial leadership consisted of Thelma Akana, Mona Hind Holmes, Elizabeth St. John, E. Black, and Julia White Brown. Footnote end. On the other hand, the ILWU sponsored a concert tour featuring Paul Robeson, which was met with mixed reactions. In June, John Reinecki handed out literature attacking the Munt-Nixon bill and invited people to attend a rally against the bill organized by the Hawaii Civil Liberties Committee at A'ala Park in downtown Honolulu. While handing out the literature, he was punched in the mouth by two men, John Lewis and Mike Dangovich, and his leaflets were scattered. The two men were later found guilty of assault and received 1-year suspended sentences. There was speculation that they had been urged on or paid by others, but no evidence was found. During this period, the Communist Party of Hawaii was actively producing propaganda against the Munt-Nixon bill, which caused outrage among some in Honolulu. The top 12 leaders of the Communist Party of the United States of America were arrested in July 1948 for violating the Smith Act. Footnote: the 12 individuals arrested included William Z. Foster, Eugene Dennis, John B. Williamson, Jacob Stachel, Robert G. Thompson, Benjamin J. Davis Jr., Henry Winston, John Gates, Irving Potash, Gilbert Green, Carl Winter, and Gus Hall. However, William Z. Foster was dropped from the group prior to the trial at Foley Square due to health reasons. It is noteworthy that these 12 individuals were all listed as co-conspirators in the 1951 indictment against Hawaii's Communist Party. Footnote end. The day before the Reinecke hearing began in August, the Star Bulletin published a Gallup poll which directed itself rather significantly to the issues of the proceedings which were about to begin in Honolulu. 4 questions were asked. 1. Would you favor or oppose a law requiring all members of the Communist Party in this country to register with the Justice Department? The Munt-Nixon bill would have done that. Favor, 77%, oppose, 12% no opinion, 11%. 2. In general, do you think most American citizens who belong to the Communist Party in this country are loyal to America or Russia? Loyal to U.S., 19%, December 1947, 16%. Today. Loyal to Russia, 59%, December 1947, 65%. Today. No opinion, 22%, December 1947, 19%. Today. 3. Should American citizens who are members of the Communist Party be forbidden to hold civil service jobs, or should they have the same rights as others to hold government jobs? Another question specifically related to Munt-Nixon. Forbidden, 67%, allowed, 19% no opinion, 14%. 4. Should an individual accused of being a communist have the right to a hearing before being dismissed? Yes, 68%, no, 19% no opinion, 8%. On the day the Reinecke hearing began, Whittaker Chambers, a senior editor of Time magazine, began his portentous testimony concerning Alger Hiss, president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, before the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Chambers charged that he and Hiss had been fellow members of the Communist Party in the years immediately preceding World War II. Since Hiss had then been an employee of the State Department, and since he had held positions of responsibility at the Dumbarton Oaks Conference, the Yalta Conference, and the San Francisco meeting where the United Nations Charter was adopted, the charge that he had been a member of the Communist Party aroused considerable attention. Footnote: there is an immense body of literature concerning the Hiss case, including major works by the 3 principal actors in the drama. Whittaker Chambers Witness, New York, 1952, Alger Hiss in the Court of Public Opinion, New York, 1957, and Richard M. Nixon's 6 Crises, New York, 1962. Perhaps the most important aspect of the Hiss case was the way in which the liberal establishment, which had initially sprung to Hiss's support, learned to avoid confrontations with those making charges of communist subversion. As Walter Goodman said in his excellent short account of the Hiss case in his volume The Committee, those who in 1948 associated themselves with the sad cause of Alger Hiss made an error for which the liberal cause would pay in the next dozen years. Another important aspect of the case was the immense lift it gave to the career of the freshman representative from California, who was Hiss's chief accuser, Richard M. Nixon. He saw the case from its rather shaky beginnings to its dramatic conclusion. Footnote end. While this mainland drama was building, Hawaii was preparing to witness the hearing before the Territorial Commissioners of Public Instruction concerning the suspension of John and Eiko Reinecke. Any hopes the Reineckes may have had that time would bring about a more favorable climate for their hearing were surely disappointed.